How does that make you feel?
I feel all right. It's what it is. I think I'm making a difference. I like to think.
So how do they do that? They take the bodies from just the homeless of the area, or what kind of
I don't know.
people do you find for them?
So this our town is almost it's almost too small to really have a homeless population.
Too small?
Yeah, it's a small town, population of like 7,500 or something.
So a small town in Wyoming, huh?
Yeah, you know that.
That's the makings for a pretty good horror story there. A small town in Wyoming, and you're finding victims for this discrete vampire population that you serve. And
It's more of like it's a skinwalker population because there's reservations very close by.
maybe they're working in tandem. You never know.
Oh, yeah. But I don't believe in vampires.
Oh, of
That's
course you're
fairy
going to
tale
say that.
stuff.
That's your disclaimer as a good politician. Like, oh, they're not real.
Yeah. Skinwalkers, on the other hand, better believe it.
I see.
They're
Why are
as
they
real
real?
as I'm here today. What?
Have you encountered one?
Probably.
You don't want to talk about it?
Uh,
I
no,
see.
I
You don't
mean,
want to talk about
you know,
it.
I don't I don't kiss and tell. you
Oh,
know,
guess what, everybody? Coming to you live from Salt Lake City and nondescript town, Wyoming. Mark
That's Lander, Wyoming. You can
Skinwalker.
tell.
Huh?
I'm not ashamed of where I live. Lander, Wyoming.
I didn't say you should be. I
Oh,
said nothing. All I said was Mark, small town, a nondescript small town in Wyoming. Keep your anonymity going.
my CN enemy?
See an enemy, you have his anonymity in. As everybody knows, vampires,
Don't exist.
anonymity is synonymous with longevity.
Mm.
Have you read Necroscope by Brian Lumley?
No, it's on my list though. On your
Did I
recommendation.
tell you about that? I think I did.
Yeah, yeah, you did.
Really,
And
really
I
good
told you that.
vampire book.
Yeah, and I'm gonna give it a shot because I mean, one, I'm not into vampires. I think they're kind of hokey. Like 99% of all vampires are just sort of, they're just goth dudes.
No, well,
But
these vampires are not like that at all.
I know you told me there's more of like a cyber
No, no, no,
futuristic.
no. No, not futuristic. What are you talking about?
I don't know.
Brian Lumley's vampires in Necroscope are brutal, like kind of vicious monsters, kind of. They can be actually they don't change forms into humans and like walk around and like wear capes. They're like
They're
just
like
kind of like
beasts.
basically they're a monster for the rest of their life, but they're etiquette.
Are they
They talk.
intelligent?
They can talk to you. They're intelligent. They don't, they're not snarling like that, but
Mhm.
they're kind of monstrous. But when they transform into battle mode or
Mhm.
feasting mode, they become more monstrous. Like their gums rip open, and all these teeth like needles come out, and
Are they the protagonist? Is the protagonist a vampire?
not really. No, they're quite the antagonist in the entire series of books. And there's a young
Okay, so
man
they're
named
being they're
Harry.
being fought. They're the enemy.
Yes, they are the pernicious, lingering death of each and every book that you read. There's like a bunch of books in the series, but the main five, the first five, are the ones you really want to read. Necroscopes 1 through 5, but
Yeah.
they're quite the vicious animals, and they have an like they have another universe they come from, and there's like a pocket universe they're from that like they found their way here, and that's why you have the legends of Dracula and a few others, but
Oh, so
in their
there's
own
almost
world.
like a Lovecraftian kind of element to it, like a cosmic sort of thing.
That's funny you say that, because Brian Lumley, he's my favorite author, and he was very, very much inspired by not only HP Lovecraft, but August Derleth, who's another American writer that kind of handled Lovecraft's estates and affairs for a while. And his Mythos stories relating to Cthulhu, HP Lovecraft's monstrous creation, August Derleth's stories about those, I found really, really good. And I liked his better than Lovecraft's almost in a lot of cases. But anyways, Brian Lumley, the vampire author from England, mentored under August Derleth, who was kind of the babysitter of Lovecraft's affairs for a while, and like wrote a bunch of stories. And that's how Brian Lumley started, by writing Cthulhu Mythos stories and just other stuff related to stuff that Lovecraft had done and in that vein. And so it's funny you say that, because yes, indeed, it's very much Lovecraftian. Like there's like this other element where you go into the vampire's homeworlds after the first 5 books of Necroscope, and it gets to be a little bit more of a fantasy thing. But they're in what's basically a medieval land, which there's peasants and like gypsies, caravans of gypsies who are just like hunted and hounded by the vampires. And the vampires are more vicious beasts there, and they have like battles with each other, and they have giant castles, and they have like malleable flesh they make from humans that they turn into like warrior creatures. It's a little bit more fantasy oriented, but it's still really good. And I don't love fantasy, so I can't urge you enough to read Brian Lumley's books. Yeah. It's far
I'm not a huge fantasy fan either, but
I'm not either. But these ones are pretty good. They're not quite fantastical, like there's dragons and stuff, but I mean it's.
But I'm a sucker for Conan. The whole
Conan you say you don't like fantasy. That's your favorite series, is Conan the Barbarian.
Well, no, I don't want to say it's my favorite series. It might be, because I'm not really a fan of series. If I'm gonna read a book, I do prefer like a standalone like story, you know. But it seems like the trend these days is to be series. What?
You can read Necroscope and just each book ends on its own, but it continues the next time, and there's just more, because you're gonna want to read more once you finish one. So, for an example, and by the way, this is Mentally Challenged. This is Mark. Let's see, what's it going to be today? J.R. Torina, the Master Butcher, and Mark Conan the Barbarian Hansen, or just Mark the Barbarian Hansen.
Yeah, that's by Crom. I think you got it.
You're out there in Wyoming in the plains and tundra, just like Conan was. You're just walking around looking for shit to do, looking for food and treasure, and you meet some girl on the way, just like a rock star, man. You just meet some girl, lay something down with her, and then you leave the next morning. She's like, "Who was that guy?" And there you are in the next area.
Out here looking for my red Sonya. Yeah, basically, I live in Samaria now.
Yeah, fuck yeah. There you go.
I'll make a recommendation then too for you for sci-fi. You like sci-fi, right?
I am going to say that I like watching sci-fi up to a point, but I'm not exactly a huge fan of reading it. So actually, if you have a good Conan the Barbarian book, I would actually like to read that. But I don't love just stupid fantasy. I don't want dragons and like, you know, all that kind of shit, and like orcs and elves and like little funny furry dudes with beards that are 2 feet tall. I hate that shit.
No, I don't like that.
Like Conan the Barbarian, I'm totally down. Like he goes to a castle, there's a giant spider, and he kills it, and he steals treasure. That's the kind of shit I want to read. Is that what you're reading?
So I'll just recommend my favorite Conan book. Okay, it's called Conan the Rogue by John Maddox Roberts. And Conan the Rogue, it's my favorite of the Conan stories. For some reason, there's copies of it on eBay going for like $1,000. I wonder how much mine's worth.
Did he die? Or are those books out of print?
I think they're out of print. I mean, I've got a copy, but I mean, you can get another copy for like probably like $20 or something like that. But it's the reason it's my favorite one is that through the entire book, there's no like every Conan book's like kind of, you know, there'll be like sort of the prologue, and it's usually involving, you know, the plot by some evil wizard or priestess or something like that. You know, and then it switches over to Conan doing whatever he's doing, like being a thief or something like that. And then it'll swap back to like a scene without him. Through this book, somehow the writer was able to like basically keep him in the narrative the whole time. So it's almost like almost like a documentary, like a film crew just following him around the whole time. So it never like switches into like an alternate scene or anything like that where he's not in it. So every chapter, every scene in the book, he's in it. You know, I
Why
kind of
is
like
that?
that. I don't know. I just kind of like that concept.
Well, that sounds interesting, but at the same time, I also love to like dip over to the villain's place and see what they're doing. That's what makes a lot of that stuff. See, that's about Brian Lumley. That's the opposite thing that I love about his books is you'll get the vampire story.
Mm-hmm.
You have the main character, Harry Keogh, who is the Necroscope. He can talk to dead people in his mind.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we talked about this a while ago, but he can using mathematics. He uses like these high formula equations to actually like twist and manipulate reality up to a point, so to speak, that he can actually step into this dimension that this mathematician from decades and like eons ago found out about. But he talked to the guy who's dead and figured out how to do it. So now he can do that. So essentially, for lack of a better explanation, to shorten it up a little bit, is Harry Keogh can disappear and travel to wherever he wants. So he conjures these equations in his head, steps into this doorway that no one but him can see, and he's in England. But all of a sudden, if he steps through the door, he jumps through this continuum and then conjures another door, and he's in, the Czech Republic or Massachusetts or, the Mormon temple or whatever the fuck. So
cool.
It's kind of a cool concept, but the way he explains it in the book, it's like rational, and you can say, okay, well, it's mathematical. That's cool, and that can work. But they go to the villains a lot, and after you read Harry's story for a while, you're like, okay, he's just a basic Scottish kid and whatever, he got picked on, but the vampires, you're like, there's a guy that he fights in the first book, and he talks to a vampire in the ground who's telling about this other vampire, and then you get the whole vampire story for like literally like a third of the book without interruption. It's just the story of this one vampire that he's going to fight, and then the vampire is telling his story, but he's telling it to someone else in the book. But you're getting the whole story of this guy who lived in ancient times, like 12th century or something, and they were in castles and they were fighting and storming villages and pillaging. And then you got the story of how he went to this castle and became a vampire, and there were servants there. It was just, the whole thing was just like so fascinating to read about somebody living in medieval times, but with a vampiric twist.
Okay.
And you can
Well,
believe
no, I mean that makes sense on that.
The way he writes it, you can just believe it, because it's just like, it's not like fantastical. It's just like, well, we went to this castle, the guy like brought us in, and then like little by little my guys are disappearing, and then like he changed me, and like one night while I drank this wine or something. It's just all like, it's really cool. And like you'll get these stories about how they were on the campaigns. Like the other vampire, the main vampire of the entire series, is named Fëdor, which means father. He's like the head vampire of the entire thing here on Earth. Like he was the first. So he's telling Harry, our main protagonist, his story and how he fought in the Crusades, and then he was in like all these other things going down through time because he was a vampire, and he was in like World War I and World War II, and that's where he died, just from something stupid like a beam falling from his ceiling and impaled him. And it was like, fuck, really? Like he lived like all these like hundreds of years and did all these wars, and then he just died in World War II because the roof caved in. Fuck.
That's actually kind of funny.
It's a great book. It's such a good book. It's fucking awesome. It's so realistic.
You know what's weird though is like
vampires are real.
It's one that like I remember even as a little kid, when I'd go to like a Barnes and Noble or something like that, loving the covers of those books, like kind of being fascinated by, like I remember like it looked like one cover was just like sort of this desert scene, and there's like this huge like sort of fortress that's in the shape of a skull, like kind of a, right?
Are you talking about Lumley's books?
Yeah, the necroscopes.
Yeah, there's there's like an enormous fucking tank or something outside, like resonating its engine and beeping. I don't know what the fuck's going on.
Look at you and your noisy environment.
Can you hear it?
No, I can't hear it.
No, it's a cement truck. I don't know what the fuck they're doing, but okay.
Well, probably pouring cement. That's generally.
Well, I went to an owners meeting the other day for the first time at this place, and yeah, they're promising to fix a lot of shit. So I guess that's what they're doing. But
Are
all
you the
right, well,
one that's
anyways,
going to those meetings and like complaining about everything?
basically, yeah, like the other people
Okay.
there were like, God damn, they were just like laying into these mother. I felt sorry for the guys that I was pissed at, and like, hey fellas, my shit's not that big of a deal. Just handle it, okay? That's cool. Just whatever. And these other guys were like just assailing them like endlessly, and like it got to the point where I'm like, okay, they get the idea. They don't answer their phone and they don't return calls. Let's get past that in this meeting. But these people were like, oh yeah, like, you don't answer your phone. I'm like, we got it. But anyways, the book cover you saw is called The Last Aerie, and it's funny you mentioned that because that's one of my favorite books he wrote, and that's book number 2 of the series where they go to the vampires dimension. And that book is filled with stories like the one I just told you about, where the vampires are like, they have their own little castles, are called Aeries, the last Aerie. And each vampire has his own gigantic fortress like that in this part on this planet where half of it's always in sunlight and half's always in darkness. So you get all these amazing stories of like the backstories of all these different unique vampires who are in this area. Like there's one that's like a wolf who got bit by a wolf, so he's basically a werewolf, but he's a vampire. There's like a female one. There's like one that only likes to have sex with trogs, which are these brutish creatures, kind of like apes on that world. And there's just all kinds of crazy stories. And like he gives you so much character development, even for like minor characters. Like there's another vampire who's like manipulated himself to look like a giant vampire bat. And like even the other vampires regard him as a freak. It's like it's crazy. It's like it's so in depth. Like Brian Lumley, like HP Lovecraft will spend pages like explaining like what something looks like, and that's awesome to me. I love that. Like HP Lovecraft in the Mountains of Madness, that story, he was describing the old ones, those creatures. They were basically like a cucumber with tentacles, I guess, with a flower on top. I mean, that's kind of what they looked like.
Yeah.
But he goes off like explaining just the tentacle and like the appendages and like the little fibers at the tip of the appendages, like for like 2 pages. HP Lovecraft. You're like, God damn. It's like super descriptive. And Lumley's kind of like that, but he doesn't like quite get ridiculous with it. But it just really grips you, and you get the vampire story. And it's like I find that like when you read his books, you're kind of disappointed when the chapter ends. It goes back to the normal people in like modern day England. You're like, fuck, I was really getting into that, man. I felt like I was back in the castle, And I remember I was reading one of those books for the first time, and I lived at home, and my mom called me to dinner, and I was like, I had to like extricate myself from that. Like I was so like caught up in the heady medieval Europe, like, castles and shit, that I was like had to unplug and like go upstairs and with my mom and dad and eat dinner and watch the news and shit. It was really good stuff. I actually reread those recently, so for like the 3rd time.
So let me give you my recommendation. Since you're into since you kind of like vampires and you like sci-fi, you don't like to read.
See, like Conan the Barbarian, I can get into, but as long as it's like not some big thing where he's a good, I don't know, you know what I mean? Like I like the idea of him breaking into a castle or just like wandering here and there and getting caught up in some shit with some monster or some wizard. That's kind of what I'm looking for. The one book I read didn't have that.
Well, the thing with I think what makes Conan so attractive to other than he's just hot, but it's just someone like even like me, someone who's like a weak man, a weak child, and but also very like kind of rebellious and individualistic. That's sort of his thing. He's like a lone wolf. And usually he's an underdog. He's kind of always on the outside of things. He's never fits in quite anywhere. And I think that really resonates with probably a lot of people, which probably explains his popularity. Plus, he always gets the chicks, right? So.
Well, that's what I mean. He's like this one guy that just goes around and just goes through this crazy stuff with these crazy creatures and wizards, and then there may or may not be a girl, and he may or may not steal a treasure. That's kind of like, it's kind of like an anti-Indiana Jones in the way. That's kind of what I want to read about, like a medieval Indiana Jones.
Mhm.
But I mean, I've read one book and it was just so plodding. I just couldn't get through it, and I just never tried it again. But I know, how does it relate to the Marvel comic of Conan the Barbarian?
Conan the Rogue. You mean?
I mean, any of the books, how do they relate to the comics? Is it just the same thing, or
Well,
did Marvel
I
kind of
think
turn
I
it more
think the
into a
comics are
superhero?
actually. I think they're adapted from a lot of the stories in the books. Because I mean, I don't think I've read every Conan book or story because there's literally hundreds of them. I think they were originally published in Weird Tales, like back in the day. Um, so there's a lot of short stories and things like that. And then you have like kind of your standards, like the ones that the movies were made from, like Conan the Destroyer, Conan the Barbarian. But then you have like Conan the King. But no, I think they're taken from the comics and the graphic novels are taken from the actual stories themselves too. So I could be wrong. I'm not exactly like a curator of Conan or anything like that. I just really enjoy the stories, and I enjoy that character. I relate to him. Um, but
Well,
so
yeah, you're a
so
rock star.
yeah, long hair, blue eyes,
So the
muscle
Marvel, they
bound.
had a regular comic book, like your average comic book, and he had his
Yeah,
own series there. But then there was
yeah,
also like a magazine, like a bigger, like a regular pulp magazine that was black and white.
yeah. I
But I
remember like
always would,
I used to have those comics when I was a kid. Like I had a few of them. I wish I still had them. They're probably worth something, but um, yeah, those are great. The comics were
but they
great.
had a magazine they did, and
Hmm.
like
And they
at
were,
the
yeah,
time,
black and white.
yeah, at the time I was like, oh, it's just black and white, and I don't know why I would be put off by that, but I never got into it. But the covers were always so fantastic. Like there was one where he had a giant shark, and he was, for some reason, he was underwater, and there was this gigantic mutant shark that was going to kill him, and it swallowed him. I read the comic, and he burst his way out of it and killed it. But he's going after some treasure or something, and there's another one with the wizard on the cover, and there's another one with a spider, and there's another one with like just a giant bear, or just like, or some monster. It's always something like that. I'm like, that's kind of what I
Yeah.
want to read about. But the book somehow, like, and like I said, this is one book where I read like the first half and just couldn't get past it. But
Mhm.
what am I missing here?
I mean, I don't know. Like, once again, I think that's the reason I like the Conan the Rogue. It just sort of starts like the pacing of it. It's like Die Hard in Conan time. You know what I mean? It's just basically, he just steps into some shit, and so the plot of that
He's
one
got
is
a Hans
basically
Gruber looking for him.
he's got several Hans Grubers looking for him, and I mean, really, what it is he finds himself kind of in this really corrupt city, and you know, he came there because he was helping a damsel in distress. As usual, he gets in trouble because of a chick, right? And
Don't we
but
all?
he finds that this town is just so corrupt that start kind of he starts pitting local gangs against each other and sort of just starts mixing it up, and so it's really about him just like stirring up trouble in this town that's already kind of on the verge of chaos, and he's just basically going to facilitate like the entire crumbling of this city, by kind of forming these alliances and then sort of uh, two timing them and banging a couple of chicks along the way, getting it's just great, and the pacing is just really good on it. Um, it just sort of starts off fast and never really lets up. Uh, but let me give you a recommendation for sci-fi because it combines like hard sci-fi with vampirism with the vampire. It's called Blindsight
Blind Sight.
by Peter Watts. I might just send you the book. I'll send it to you. Um, and it's kind of a standalone, but dude, it's so damn good. It's a combination of um, it's sort of when I say hard science fiction, it's sort of these authors try to really base a lot of the the concepts that happen on actual physics. They do their best anyways. So it's very, very kind of, they try to make it very believable, like a believable situation. But it
Like
also,
what? Like what's the situation?
so
Who's the
it's like a
vampire
first,
and why are they a vampire?
so it's, man, it's kind of complicated, but vampires are
It's
basically,
complicated.
well, so the
Vampire
vampires,
Facebook. It's complicated.
so the vampires in this book are, they're almost like a genetic defect, that kind of, they evolved this way. And in they've evolved like, um, to kind of live a lot longer, right? And they do live off, blood of victims. Uh, but it's not it's not a supernatural, but it's more of like a genetic kind of mutation. They evolved this way, and they also evolved to um, be averse to like right angles. So the cross, crucifixes, they're still, they find those, they can't look at them or else they get like all weirded out. But the vampire is like a captain of this ship that's going out to kind of like the outer part of the solar system to investigate like kind of an anomaly going on. Almost like an alien presence. And it's all about them kind of trying to figure out this, what these kind of entities or this, kind of ship is there for. Are they friendly? Are they, you know, not friendly? What are they? So it's really cool. I mean, uh, it's been a little while since I've read it, but it's basically there's these kind of weird objects called fireflies, start showing up in the atmosphere, and yeah, they just go out to investigate what's going on. So it's like part hard science fiction, part vampire, and it's kind of like a first contact type story, of alien contact. So, but very
Interesting.
very believable, very dark, and kind of, and even a little bit of Lovecraftian kind of going on in there with the aliens they meet up with. Um,
It
yeah,
sounds like a dream I had once.
it's kind of, yeah. I think you would dig it. I really do. Um,
Yeah, I would. I don't know. I would read that. I'm just my idea of science fiction is not. I don't want to read like goofy looking aliens and like
no, I don't like the Star Wars stuff. Yeah, I don't want laser like, you know, lightsabers and Ewoks and Jar
Well,
Jar and
Star Wars is fine on its own, but and it's becoming this abomination now. Like Disney's just like hit or miss, mostly misses. But like science fiction, if I'm going to read science fiction, I kind of don't really like to read it. I like to watch it. Like I had this conversation with a guy that used to work at my work. Like he's all about reading it, and I'm like, I don't want to read about like spaceships. I don't want to read people like going into space and like something malfunction and they're gonna die if they don't do this or that soon. Like there's episodes of science fiction. Those are the worst episodes where they're trapped in a space shuttle. Like I don't want to read 1,000 pages of that or like some alien that you don't understand. And I don't know. It's just it seems like it's boring reading to me. Like it's
hmm.
um but there's science fiction that can be good, but it's got to be done like something interesting. But that's also kind of Brian Lumley, it's like some of his stuff veers over into science fiction almost. So, but vampirically, so I don't know. He has other books too that are science fiction that are good. Like there's a book called The House of Doors that he does that's pretty good. It's interesting and it's
Lumley
sci-fi in a
did
different way. What's that?
Brian Lumley.
Brian Lumley, yes.
Oh, so he
He did
has
it.
other.
Oh yeah, of course. He actually has his own barbarian series of books, and this might be another reason why I'm kind of not into barbarian stuff because these are the ones that he's written that I don't really like of his works. Which is weird because I like most everything he's done, but he has a barbarian named Tara Kash, and it's just like Conan. It's a muscly dude with long hair, but he's in this realm of like Lovecraftian worlds.
Yeah.
And eventually you figure out he's going to go to see Cthulhu. But when I read those books, I just could not get into it. It was just too fantastical. And like, I can't remember like specifically what I didn't like, but they were like just kind of creatures. You know, when you look at a book, like the cover, especially going back to the 70s and 80s, you look at science fiction and fantasy books, like you look at the covers and the creatures are just like these outlandish,
Yeah.
like a yellow horse. It looks like a seahorse, but it's a horse. It has big, long, skinny legs, like, and like just stuff like
Yeah. Yeah.
that. I'm like, you know, I don't want to read about like, or like there's some alien dude that looks like I don't know, just doesn't look quite real. You know, I'm like,
Yeah. Yeah. Or there. Well, one thing I don't like about like a lot of like alien, when sci-fi tries to make aliens, um, and I'm almost hypocritical because I do love Star Trek, and I like the aliens of Star Trek, but when I think about like what an alien actually might look like, I don't think the it's not going to be just a human with green skin. Like I think it's just going to be so beyond what we can even really comprehend, if you ask me. So I do like, if a sci-fi book's going to depict aliens, I want it to be as non-human as possible. I don't want two legs, two arms, the symmetry of a humanoid kind of thing. Even though maybe that's how it is in real life, if
well, that
there
would
are.
make hard storytelling. Would you be like interacting with the gaseous cloud or what?
Well, and I think, believe it or not, I think that's what Lovecraft was trying to go for.
Well, he
He
does.
was
He does
trying.
do that. Like some of,
You
like
could
he has
hear
a
him almost like struggling because he wanted his creatures so strange and
well,
so
yeah. He had
unrelatable.
a Zathoth, if I remember, was like a cloud or a mass of flesh that was formless or something like that. Or
Yeah, formless, or it's like
and
you
then
said,
there's
like a
a
tentacle with a flower on top, and just like,
and there's Cthulhu, and then there's like another one called Cthulhu or something, if I remember, who's like a fire entity, but the name is similar to Cthulhu, and it's like Cthulhu's brother. Or
mhm.
I'm like, okay. And then there's like who I can't remember all of them, but there's another one. It's like a
um,
cosmic entity. There's
Sog as.
Ithaqua, who's like a Nordic kind of entity who lives in the cold of outer space and like cold planets, and he's like this kind of
Mhm.
a Wendigo looking thing, and he has all kinds of stuff. But
Yeah, I wonder where he was getting these.
that's what I'm saying. This guy lived in the late 19th
Right?
century. Like, what the fuck was
There's
he
where's
doing that
there's
he
no
has these
reference
visions?
point. Yeah, like.
Fuck. How do you and that's the thing is like that's a good story in itself because you figure what if HP Lovecraft like really went somewhere like in some way like some gateway opened or some alien took him, and how did he get this description, like such thorough descriptive like detail, like he
Mhm.
had to
And
have been there, you know, you almost have to
I
think
don't
like
even
he had
know,
to have
like,
been there.
I mean, I don't know much about like just his history. Was he into like psychedelic drugs, or was he?
I don't
Uh,
know, it's there's conjecture about that, but I would assume that maybe probably not, but I don't know, who knows. But would
no, it's just because a
psychedelic
lot of those
drugs really
weren't.
make you get that like that? I mean, I guess they could, but
Yes. Yeah. Oh yeah. Um,
it
I
to me
mean,
it seems like he
DMT
some of his
definitely, but
stuff. Well, I don't know, but some of his stuff it just seems like you almost have to think that he had to experience or thinks he experienced something for real because the detail,
uh
the level, and just if you take all the pantheon of gods he created, those are staggering on their own, each one of the detail and like their backstory. But then with the detail with Cthulhu,
yeah.
how it breaks down into he's imprisoned on Earth and he influences people in the oceans and in the cities around him, and they have a fish look to them because they're breeding with these aliens, and just the way it goes on, it's like this entire fucking thing that you just almost take as history if it wasn't so fantastic. It's just so crazy and descriptive, and you got to wonder too because he has a thing called the Innsmouth Look. Like Innsmouth is a
Mhm.
city, like in
Yeah.
Massachusetts, or a town, and that's all the people there are like influenced by Cthulhu. So they have a fish look, Their eyes are starting to spread apart. Their lips are getting fat and fleshy and big. Like their mouth is really pronounced. They kind of almost have scaly skin. If you look close, webbed fingers. And you look and you see people once in a while out in everyday life, and they'll have like features kind of like that. Their eyes will be far apart, or they'll have like just like an unusually large mouth, or
Hmm.
you see it and you're like, oh man, the Innsmouth. So I don't know. Who knows? Like HP Lovecraft was seriously like bizarre as fuck. And then the thing now is everybody's fixating on the fact that he's a racist or he was a racist.
Oh.
And I don't know. I mean, that guy, he died in the 1930s, right? So who the fuck
Yeah.
knows?
Well,
But
yeah, you got to think, I mean, just the social norms were just so different back then. I mean,
well, that's what I say. But the rumor was his cat. He named his cat the N word. I'm like, okay, I don't know if that's true or not, but if it is true, it's like,
well, he
okay,
loved
that's
his
weird.
cat, I'm sure. So, I mean, I don't even,
Maybe his
you
cat
know,
was black and that's what he meant. I don't know. Like, it could have
yeah.
been anything, if that's even what he really named his cat. But
But did
even
he hate
so,
his cat? You know?
well, I mean, that's the thing. Is like you look at HP Lovecraft. He like this frail,
He's
and
a
he was a
weird dude.
sickly, frail guy. He was always on like
Hmm.
one foot in the grave. He was always just like sickly and frail.
Hmm.
And I highly doubt that he was, at like hate rallies or something. So I don't know.
No, no,
I don't know, like what what
it
what
kind
his
of goes back to
backstory
my,
was.
it goes back to my thing about, like, if someone's a racist but completely harmless, then it's not even worth the energy, trying to come down on him. And, and if, he's frail and can't do anything and writes some fantastic cosmic horror, you know,
Well, everybody's
compartmentalize
liking
it.
HP Lovecraft, yeah, and that's why it's funny because there's a I don't know if it was Netflix or HBO or someone. There's a show that's based on Lovecraft. I can't remember the name of it, but it's
Uh,
based completely on Lovecraft, and I haven't seen it. For a while there, HP Lovecraft was the rage with Hollywood, but there was a TV show, and it was like mostly black people that were starring in it.
uh-huh.
And I'm like, that's unusual because most of his stuff was like really milk toast white, back east people in like these little villages.
Right.
But whatever, they have all black people in there. But I'm like, that's unusual. But I don't know if that was a statement by people to try and right a wrong in their minds or what. But it's not
I don't
like
know.
he's known for being a Nazi or something. I mean,
No, I
he
mean,
died before that shit even happened. So.
like I said, even if he was, that wasn't like a focal point of him. That it might have just
Well, it's
been
like
like
what we
almost
talked
like a
about before.
throwaway
I mean,
opinion.
we've covered Burzum to death on here and like about how like is it okay to like his music? But I'm like, well, what about all the people who are out there listening to Michael Jackson? They still like him, and he's
Hmm.
basically accepted that he's a pedophile now. I mean, okay, and like that's okay to listen to his music. And Kanye has come out to say all this anti-Semitic things, and like everybody still listens to Kanye. All these white kids, even the woke ones that work with me. So you know what?
Mm.
Fuck everybody. It's like I don't know what H.P. Lovecraft may have did or said or thought. I just know that he wrote these crazy fucking horror stories, and I
Yeah.
highly doubt anything else. He was like this little weaselly, like milk toast, frail, sickly little man with this crazy imagination. So, and if it weren't
Yeah.
for
Like
him,
I
we
said,
wouldn't
there
have.
was nothing. There was nothing like that up until him. Like he
Fuck no.
came out of
Edgar
like
Allan Poe was
nowhere.
like the extreme as it got, and that was Lovecraft's inspiration was Poe.
Oh, okay.
And
Yeah,
in
I mean that's
fact,
the closest thing, right?
actually, I think H.P. Lovecraft wrote a story about Edgar Allan Poe, where there were aliens and they infiltrated humanity, and they picked the face of Edgar Allan Poe, and the character noticed they all looked like Edgar Allan Poe. I'm like, that's a weird story. So
Hmm.
right there, you got to think he must have been doing some drugs or something. I don't know, because he really had some seriously weird fucking stories. But he also did a lot of science fiction kind of stuff too. It's not quite as popular. Like there's one called The Walls of Eryx,
Poe?
where there's a spaceship that crashes, this human spaceship patrol like crashes on this planet, and this guy goes to look at something and he gets stuck. He can't get out, and everybody can see him, but apparently there's a maze, but it's invisible. So his friends can't reach him, and there are these creatures, and he dies from being in the maze, and like they can see his body, and then like eventually a week later they can see his body, and like there's like insects all over it, and they're like it's rotting, and all the guys are trapped in the walls, and that's how the story ends. Is like everybody dies trapped in these invisible walls of this maze, and but it was a spaceship on another planet, you know. So he did a lot of other weird shit. It's just Cthulhu is what he's known for.
Oh,
Brian
I didn't
Lumley's
know
the
that.
same way. He has so many different, just
Dude,
weird,
I was
odd
looking at his
stories.
his bibliography, and you know, as someone who's dabbled in writing, man, do you look at something like that? You know, you look at all the books Lumley wrote, and you're like, how the hell does someone put out so many novels? Like, you
Well, a
know,
lot of it's short
I could
stories.
barely write
That's
one page without just giving up and wanting to, you know,
you got to have a passion for it. But I mean,
I
but
do. I
here's the
just
thing
don't.
too. Like, here's the thing too is like with Lovecraft, we're saying how could he think of this? But like the one book I've published so far was all based on a dream, and I have
The
another
House on the
story,
Port.
The House in the Port. Yep, and that's based on Lovecraft, but it was like all those images in that story came to me from a dream, like a wet footprint in the kitchen, and the whimpering dog, and the guy way out in the ocean waving to the guy on his deck, like sitting on his porch watching the ocean. There's like a merman pops up and waves to him, and all that shit was dreams I had that just came to me. And then I had another couple of short stories that I kind of published in like this collection of publishings with these other guys from the Church of Satan. It's called Trilogy. It's 3 short stories that I wrote, and they're all like extremely Lovecraftian kind of based stuff, and they're just like these crazy just dreams I had. So maybe Lovecraft had some serious crazy fucking dreams, and Brian Lumley maybe too, and extrapolated on that and Lovecraft stuff. But a lot of them do short stories too, so they'll print like the way it worked back then for Lumley is he was in the army. So in his spare time, he'd write short stories and just submit them to magazines like Amazing Fiction and Science Fiction Monthly or just whatever. And they'd eventually have all these different stories. He'd get money for each one. And then, like, that's what a lot of his early books are, just collections of like all of his short stories. But then when he wrote Necroscope, that was his, you know, his Star Wars, his big book that broke him big. But it's unfortunate because people here don't really know that much about Brian Lumley. He's got a cult following here, but even on the back of his book, it says rivals Anne Rice by some critic. I'm like, rivals Anne Rice? He fucking destroys Anne Rice. Fuck that. He's the fucking god. I don't give a fuck about. See, that's where I don't like vampires. It's like the moany, fucking whiny ass, bitchy ass motherfuckers with long hair and the puffy shirt, and they're bitching and whining about being
Yeah.
immortal. It's like, fuck you. Brian Lumley's vampires like, I'm fucking immortal, man. I love this shit. I'm gonna go fuck some peasants. I'm gonna get some gypsies
Right.
and drink their blood. I'm gonna fucking kill some motherfuckers and get into a fight. And they
Yeah, I
love
mean,
their
if you're
lives.
a
They're not like
vampire,
this.
lean into it, right?
Yeah, they're like totally loving it. They're not like, oh, what am I gonna do? And there's a little element of that because you got to have some character development for the main
Sure.
Harry Keogh, the main protagonist. So, but yeah, it could be dreams. Like I'm pretty sure Lovecraft had some crazy, you know, interesting, crazy dreams. But
Your dreams are still sort of based a little bit around, you know, just your normal, you know, what you know, right? And ain't nobody.
kind of. But I mean, I've had, like I said, I've had just insane, crazy dreams. Like the 3 short stories. I want to republish that and like put it out because I don't think anybody knows about it. But I had 3 small short stories. One was inspired by exactly what you just said. Like there was one called I forget what I named it. But it was about smog. Because if you remember in Salt Lake, we had this horrible, horrible smog problem for a while. And when I lived in Cottonwood Heights up in the mountains, it was even starting to creep up the mountain. Like I was above all that shit for the most part.
Right.
Like I go on my porch and look at the city in the valley, and you can see this blanket of this gray, filthy, disgusting smog over the city. And like it wasn't up where I was, but at one point it started to actually reach up there. And it was because we live in the bowl. It's basically a giant meteorite crater here, like surrounded by mountains. And then you have all this industry with all these trucks and like smoke and it's all this shit hanging in the air. And then because it's in the mountains surrounded, it like can't go away until there's wind, you know. And so I had the story where there was a fog in this village and people were getting like, you know, corrosively eaten away by it. And like, so these kids are there. And that's one short story where this girl comes in freaking out into this grocery store. Everybody's like buying supplies and going crazy. And they find the girl and she was crying. And then they found her in the back of the store and she was completely decomposed, like this big stain on the floor. Like the fog had like acidically just, you know, and that was a dream I had. So I'm like, okay. And then the next dream was those same kids were in the mountains and there was a priest up there, and then he had this church somehow in the mountains hidden away, and there was like this congregation of people in the church, but they were all human corpses. So the priest was this lunatic that was up there, and I tie that into the story that he was taking in people to get away from the fog up in the mountains in his church, but he was actually killing them. And then one of the guys from the group of friends escapes, and I had this other dream where there was this crazy fucking monster with long white hair and these giant bug eyes that was and these big fangs that was just chasing me around in this dream, and I was ended up in this casket. And I was like in this casket, and I like hit the bottom of it, and like it fell, and I ended up in this secret cavern. It was the casket was like a secret passage, and I was underground. And then I was like, what the hell is all this? And I'm looking around. I eventually somehow come out, and I'm in the graveyard, and the creature comes at me. And then in the end of the book, he like gets the guy. And I probably shouldn't give that away, but yeah, that was all just dreams I had. And I don't watch horror movies. I don't read horror books, like really. So that's just shit that I dreamed. Like maybe something inspired that, but if your mind has some, and I've had other dreams like really disturbing shit, like is your mind is like just capable of like all kinds of stuff. So with HP Lovecraft, who fucking knows? But if you add drugs to that, I'm sure it's even more crazy.
So where do you think that comes from? Do you think it's coming from like the ether, or do you think it's just product of our minds?
I don't know. Maybe you're astrally traveling and really doing this, or maybe it's bits of another life. I would like to think that, but I mean, realistically, it's probably just something you heard or thought about or saw at the corner of your eye, and then it's kind of floated up to the surface while you were asleep and worked its way out, and then your mind said, "Oh yeah, let's turn that into this," you know. Like we mentioned, like I had a nightmare about The Exorcist. Like I used to always have those because I saw that when I was a kid, but then there was a party where I was an adult dressed as the devil for Halloween, and then I saw the commercial for The Exorcist when it was coming out in theaters again, the refurbished version.
Yeah.
And that night I had this insane, like just crushing, like brutal dream about the devil and being possessed, and like it was like I was hot and I couldn't move, and I woke up like, what the fuck was that? And I could hear a voice in my head, like still right when I woke up, and that was fucking scary. But I'm like, okay, well, I mean, I dressed as the devil. I was at a Halloween party, and I saw The Exorcist on TV. And also, I know what The Exorcist means to me because that movie instilled fear in me as a young kid who saw it.
Young
and
Catholic
I was like,
kid
really
too,
sick
right?
when huh?
Kind of a young Catholic too, right? Raised Catholic.
Well, I didn't believe in that shit. I never did.
Yeah, but you were raised that way, right? I mean, even if you don't believe in it,
I mean,
like
even
you
as a kid,
still,
I didn't believe that shit. But yeah, I mean, still, like your
but it's
mom's
still
heart.
there. Like it's always kind of like in the back of your mind, you know, and yeah.
But I was really sick when I saw The Exorcist on TV for the first time. So it really fucking like got in there and stayed in there for years. And that's what I mean. Maybe it's just in dreams. Like I used to have dreams about sharks. Like I had these fearful dreams about great white sharks. And then I did some research on them and realized they're not like these things that go around killing people and eating them like in the movies. And that they're actually like amazing creatures, and they're survivors. They're prehistoric, you know. And I love sharks. And then after that, I took the time to think about it and research, and I had dreams where I was in the water with them, just kind of hanging out, you know. And I never had them again after that. So it also goes to show you can control your dreams too. That's lucid dreaming, but I don't know.
I told you my lucid dreaming story, but
you did. Did you?
Well, like I'm sure we've talked about it. Like
well, I know we talked about it. I'm sure we did.
Like
I know
the sleep paralysis, right?
Yeah, yeah. I actually just posted that episode just now, the Halloween episode, number 25.
Oh, really?
Sleep paralysis.
We talked about sleep
you said
paralysis.
You had sleep paralysis. That's right. I remember.
Yeah,
we were
and
telling ghost stories. I told you my ghostly photograph story, and we were talking about EVPs, and you said you had the window blinds that were moving in your house.
Oh yeah, that was cool.
I just put that episode up. Didn't you listen to it just in time for Halloween?
Dude, I don't listen to our episodes. Are you kidding?
Yes, you do.
I don't like the sound of my own voice.
Why not? It's fucking sexy.
I don't know, dude.
I have my shirt off right now. I'm like, God, his voice sounds good today.
Yeah, right. Not right. Really. Pinching your nips.
I'm wearing a shirt. I'm kidding. So anyways, we run off on some tangents there about books, but that's cool. But I was
Here's a
suggesting.
tangent for you. Do you
Uh-oh.
think, um, you know how we have like, do you think sizes of clothing in the U.S., do you think a large in 2023 is the same as a large in like 1988?
Of the
Size
clothing or of the person?
of the clothing.
Uh, Hard to say because I'm sure they have specifications they go by. But as a metal guy, I have T-shirts from bands all over the world and Asia. Like the typical
Mhm.
Asian size large is like an American small. Like I
Mhm.
can't even wear it, or like a medium.
Mhm.
Like my bands will send me like a T-shirt to wear, and they expect me to wear it, and I try to, and it's so fucking tight I can't even get the thing over my head. And they're like, "Is it that tight?" I'm like, "Yeah, dude, I work out. I'm a big guy," and like it's our shirt sizes are totally different. Don't you know this?
Mhm.
But as far as American, I don't know. I would tend to say maybe it is because I think people are like kind of
Getting bigger. Like, and listen, I'm not
more
really into.
muscular. It seems like people are more streamlined and more, or maybe they're getting smaller.
Are you
Or no, they're
kidding?
getting bigger. They're
Here?
getting bigger.
Yeah, yeah.
Why do you say
So,
that?
well, I don't know. So I ordered a shirt, and I guess it was my fault, but normally I check the sizes, but I didn't get, I wear a large or a medium, right? Medium or large, but I didn't get sent a large or a medium. I didn't get sent an extra large. I didn't get sent extra large. I got a triple XL shirt,
Yeah.
and I'm looking at it going, how the hell does someone get like I thought they sent me a sheet with the death logo on it. It's like I wanted a death t-shirt, so I ordered one. And I got this big old XXL death shirt, and I'm just like,
You,
how
s- you
how does
send it
someone
back?
get that big? No, because I mean it looks like I accidentally ordered it. I'll just keep it, whatever. It was like
No, just
20
send it
bucks.
back and say there was a mix-up. You don't have to keep it. What are you going to do with it? Make a tapestry out of it?
Put it on my queen size mattress, and that's with room to spare. No,
Well,
I
send
don't
it
know.
back and say you sent me the
I'll
wrong
just cut
size.
out the logo and like I don't know.
No, don't do that. Just send it back. Just say there was a
Dude,
fuck up. They'll exchange it.
no, I'm not gonna worry
But
about that.
anyways, as
That's
far as that, I
ridiculous.
mean, XXXL, it's like that's kind of an anomaly. But there's a lot of 2XL guys. I mean, especially in the metal scene.
Oh yeah, yeah.
That's what's funny is most people buy a large or extra large, but I noticed that like a lot of people, and you notice it's the types of metal, like black metal. I
Mhm.
sell a lot more t-shirts in size small and medium to black metal kids, and then death
Mhm.
metal guys are more large, extra large.
Mhm.
Which again, I'm going with Europe versus America there.
Yeah,
So,
probably a similar thing, and and I wonder, that is interesting, if that the genre of music you listen to can actually, I mean, not all the time, and
well, mostly
even,
European people seem to gravitate towards black metal more so than
but
Americans, and vice
but there's
versa
an
with like
actual
brutal death. But
there's a physique also
well, yeah,
that
that's
seems to
that's what I was getting at. Is like
think about
Europeans.
thrashers and black metalers. You got thrashers are kind of the same. They're usually
Well, thrash kids basically exist on beer and top ramen, like just to eat, and then they go for more
yeah,
beer.
yeah, they're
Like black metal
skinny
kids from
kids.
Europe, they're like they eat like they don't have all this processed and chemically fucked up
Mhm.
food that we have, or fatty stuff like fast food over there as much as we do,
Mhm.
anyways. But then like over here, we've got like burgers and fries and like fucking Twinkies and fruit gushers and all this other shit
Mhm.
that's not real food. So
But the
soda.
death metal guys, they tend to be a little bigger and thicker, and a lot of times muscly. They tend to be almost.
Well,
They're either in
Americans
the
are
like.
also big.
Hmm.
Americans are also big because we have steroids in our cattle and hormones in our chickens, and like
Oh,
everything we eat makes us bigger. And we have
and the
water, like,
processed
and I
food.
know this for a fact because I work in a barbecue restaurant. Is a lot of the chicken you buy, people will get chicken and think, oh, that's healthier, and it's not. It's actually worse because they inject a saline solution into chicken and wings and turkey to make them
To
more plump.
flavor it. Oh, for
Not
plumping.
flavor, it's just to make them more plump, so they're bigger, so they're huge, and then
Huh.
it's and they're juicy to a point, and they're huge, but they're full of saline water. So you're getting more water and more salt in your chicken where you
Mm.
think you're eating healthier versus the beef where it's just like a lean beef that you're eating. or
So
fatty one, depending on what you get.
what do you think's responsible for? So another thing I noticed about, as far as like, um, obesity in America or whatever. So like growing up, there was the chunky kids, the fat kids, and they were kind of like fat, but they were sort of, round, and they were kind of still proportioned. But now I'm kind of seeing this obesity where it's like chicken skinny legs, right? Just twig legs, but then a big round like belly, and then
Yeah, that's
the
exactly what I'm
Tweedledum,
saying.
Tweedle.
That's what I'm
What's
saying.
going
It's
on
like
there? Like,
it's the food.
and it's
It,
and it's
it
like
could
kind of.
be. It's not just the food, but I mean, there's also things to consider too. Like people have weird health problems, like their thyroid, so their weight's out of whack in certain parts of their body, or
Mhm.
they're taking
Or just.
medication and or like pharmaceuticals that add weight. Like we had talked about this before too, but I have some friends who are, hey, they have to take medications in order to stay alive, but because of
Mhm.
that, they gain all this weight.
Yeah, I have a
And they're
friend who does
normally
that.
not like, obese people, like other people who
Mhm.
are have that in their genes, like their family's all obese, like, or,
Mhm.
large. You can see it's proportionate in their body, but like other people, it's just unnaturally big, like right where their organs are. So you see a
Oh,
lot
yeah,
of that.
right. Yeah, and it's so odd, and
And plus,
it
add to
didn't
that
used to
all
be
of our
that way.
food, the way our food is, it's like it's no wonder Americans have this crazy out of whack frames with like big fat, droopy, blubbery
Mhm.
bodies, skinny legs, and
Mhm.
like a fat neck, but like skinny legs. It's like you see that a lot, and then
I don't. Yeah,
that's
it's
why a
it's
lot of
so
people who
weird.
are eating vegetarian are like just so skinny and frail compared to most other Americans.
Yeah, vegan's not the way to go either. I mean, I could
But
see
that's
someone doing
also
it
not
for
healthy.
health, but.
There was a girl, I can't remember, it was in the news. There was a chick who was like a proponent for like raw foods.
Mhm.
She died
From like salmonella, like just not cooking
just from
something,
not
or.
eating enough.
Oh.
Just you need to eat more than just like you can't just eat like, you know, soup and the hot water and fucking a few vegetables. You have to eat like you need more food in your
No, you
body.
need you need fats. You need
You
fats. I
need
mean,
fat, you need protein, and it has to be meat protein. Like people need that these days. Human race, whether you like it or not, has evolved to eating meat. That's why people
mhm.
have canine teeth the way they do. It's
Mhm.
bean protein.
What do you think about the carnivore diet? Like.
I don't think that one's particularly like perfect either. I think you just eat a little bit of everything the way we've always been taught, and you're going to be fine.
Mhm.
It's like I don't get with diets like what it is with people. Yeah,
Uh,
I'll tell you what. Like the other day, like at my work, we had a Halloween party on Sunday, just this
mhm.
Sunday, and it was so motherfucking busy in that restaurant while we were open. I did not have a chance to even stop and take a break. It was just relentless for like hours. It just would not stop. Like people coming in, people calling, DoorDash pads going off. Like we had no chance for a break. And then right after that, we had our Halloween party because everybody like started showing up like after work when we closed. So I didn't get to eat, and all we had at the Halloween party was like cheese and crackers and like fucking brownies and just garbage food basically. If you have if you haven't eaten all day. And then so I had some of that, and then I went home like at 1 in the morning and had something for dinner, and I had my mom made me pierogies. I went and picked up pierogies from my mom, and like that was greasy,
Mm.
so I just all of that came out immediately like the next morning, and I was starving when I got to work. So just goes to show you don't just eat anything. You need to have a balanced meal at the time you're usually used to eating it. And I also noticed that when I work in a restaurant, you need to sit down and eat because if you're standing while you eat, then your heart's pumping, your adrenaline's going, and it's like digest, digest, digest quickly.
Oh,
Versus if
really?
you
I didn't
sit
know that.
down, well, I've noticed it because if I sit down and take my time and just sit down and eat instead of going, oh my god, I gotta eat. Because when you're in a restaurant, you're like you're flying. I gotta grab something right now and just shove this down my throat, and I gotta go do this, I gotta go do that. You gotta sit down and take a break because then your body's like relaxed a little bit and you have time to eat and like you absorb your food better. I've done this and I've seen it to be the truth. So if you eat on the run, 9 times out of 10, you're going to end up either digesting it too quick or getting indigestion. It's just like working out. You can't eat and then go work out. You get indigestion and the
Mm.
shits.
So you eat after you work out.
My
or
work
just
day is I'll eat a little something at work. I'll sit down and have a snack, and then I'm working, and then I'll go either to the gym right after work, and then home or just home. And then I sit down and eat, and I do that no matter what every night, and I really enjoy it. I really that's when I watch TV. I watch Star Trek or whatever. I have a beer, I have dessert, and like it all is. If you just hurry and grab something and then you're on your way, like you're eating in the car, you're on your way to a show, it's nights like that where I get upset stomach. Like I was sick Sunday night because of that party and I stayed to make sure everybody got out of there okay. And
mm,
it's like you eat like that, it doesn't do your body any good. And I think a lot of people live that way. Like a lot of people
yeah.
are more sick than they realize, or they'll say, "Oh, I have upset stomach," or "I can't eat this," or "I can't eat that." And like you just need to sit your ass down and eat a balanced meal and stop being a fucking wishy-washy motherfucker about, oh, I can't eat this or I'm not going to eat that. Or and there are certain things I don't eat, but just out of I usually avoid fast food, but once in a while, burger and fries sounds good, like from
mm.
Freddy's Steak Burgers.
Freddy's? Oh yeah, I like Freddy's.
Freddy's is
Freddy's
pretty
is
good.
good.
I don't go to McDonald's or Burger King, but Freddy's has a pretty good burger. It's like once in a while, not every day. But anyway, but I don't know. Like I've noticed, like a lot of people are like that. Have you ever noticed other things are bigger or smaller?
Um,
When I lived in Sugar House, I rented this house out that was from the 1900s.
yeah.
And the doorways in that house and the ceilings were so low and the doorways were so small. I'm like, were people really this tiny back then? Because god damn, I could like tear this house apart with my hands. Fuck. It's like so like little and the roof is so low. And now it's like doorways are these big grandiose doorways. And like I've noticed that beds are like getting smaller, but houses are getting bigger. Have you noticed that?
Yeah. I not so much, but I mean I could definitely see it.
Like
See that
houses used
happen.
to have doorways that were so small, and you think about like your grandparents and like these little tiny old people who lived in the 30s and stuff, and you're like, man, they were little. And then you think of I was looking at my mom. My aunt from New York came to visit last week,
Hmm.
and her compared to my mom, she's this little wispy tiny lady, and my mom is like this big, like burly fucking lady that could just pick you up and body slam you if she wanted to. And it's kind of funny, and they're like sisters. They're like the same family, but my mom is like the most burly one out of all of them, but she's also the most religious one. So
Mm,
it's kind of funny. But I was just noticing the size difference. I'm like, and my mom's not fat. It's not because she's fat or anything. She's just like
yeah.
got bigger bones. She's like a bigger person.
Yeah, just
And like my aunt from New York, New Jersey, is just like this little wispy, like frail little creature. I'm like, compared to my mom, I'm like, Jesus. So I don't know. It's just like you think about like the size difference of like your grandparents and like their houses. Like my grandparents' house, that was small and small doorways, and it's just I don't know. But it's funny because I have a lot of Asian bands. They'll send me T-shirts, and I can't even put one over my head. Like some of them are so small, and it sucks. I want to show my support, but I can't wear those shirts. They're just too small. And it's
mm,
not like a size difference of just the size. It's also the way they're created over there. It's like the chest area, like from front to back, from your chest to your back, like that part of the shirt is like narrower in like Asian sizes and some
mm.
European sizes. But in America, they're like these big floaty, like tenty like things that you can just wear. And that's why I don't like a lot of American shirts because they're these big floppy nightgown things, they're like this giant tent. I'm like, I'm not that big. Fuck. I like my shirt to be snug, like a snug fit, but not super tight, but not super baggy. Because you've seen those guys who have the big shirts where it's like this giant T-shirt that like goes past their waist, and it's like this big billowy shirt and like the big sleeves all dangling. I'm like, that looks ridiculous to me. But
Yeah.
and then you got that shirt, I would say return it. Like write them back, go, yeah, I fucked up. Just I'm sure they'll
Uh,
replace it for you. But you probably paid more for it too. And that's the other thing is if you buy
mm.
XXL shirts, they're more money than like an average large because it's so much
No,
more material.
I didn't pay extra for it, but I mean, it's fine. I mean, it was like I said, it was only like $24. It was fine. Um,
Return it. Why keep it?
because I mean, I think I've already thrown away the bag and everything. Like it's just almost more work than I want to put out. Um,
No,
I'll
brother.
look.
I'll bet you if you sold that online, or even Andy, you know our friend Andy from Terra Noir. Remember him, the
no,
Asian kid?
no,
You know Andy.
I don't know Andy.
Andy from Salt Lake. He's from Laos,
Do you?
Laotian kid. He always follows everybody around, always talking about metal. He
What?
used to be in my shop all the time. He was in the abyss day and night, like on my computer, like talking to his mamas. I can't. You'll know him if you see him. You're probably friends with him on Facebook. Andy O'Donnell.
Andy Diodono? Yeah, that's a very Asian name. Let me see. Andy Diodono. Hold on.
O'Donnell. Andy O'Donnell.
Oh, even more Asian. Yeah, Andy O'Donnell.
I
Hold
know
on.
you know who he is. He's like the mascot of the metal scene in Salt Lake, and he has been since like the '90s. That guy listened to my radio show. He supported my labels. He followed me around at the metal shop all the time. He'd come to my shop, The Abyss, and hang out day and night every day. Like my number one fan. Total support from the Gore King. He's been in a lot of
Is it
bands here.
is it Andi?
No,
I don't know. I'm not friends with him.
well, that's strange. We'll have to fix that.
Can't even find him to
Well,
add him.
anyway, what? How are you ready for the metal part of the show?
Oh, I didn't even know we were. Are we recording?
Yeah. Oh
Yeah.
shit.
What's the metal part of the show?
Well, I had
Um,
mentioned.
let me, yeah, let me look at your text here. Let's
I had
see.
mentioned like friends who died, but I was also. I got a few
Ah,
Rob Halford nuggets here,
I just listened to an interview with him the other day on Mark Maron.
where he said Judas Priest is the first real heavy metal band, even over Black Sabbath.
Yeah, I agree with him in a way because the
I
reason he
do.
says
Well, I
that
do too.
because Judas Priest was the only one that was the first band that I think really embraced the um, label of heavy metal. Like they're the ones that came right out and
Like
said
I
we
always
are
say,
a heavy metal band.
yeah, I always say Kiss kind of started it. Like, but I know Black Sabbath initiated all of that, like Sabbath, Zeppelin, Purple.
Mm,
And for my money, heavy metal started with the Beatles, Helter Skelter, that one song.
sure.
But
Yeah, I
if
mean,
we're talking about bands, like Kiss gave you the spectacle and the live concert experience, and they had a few heavy songs.
mhm.
But really, and Judas Priest started out as like a hippie band. But once they probably are really the heavy metal guys who actually used the term heavy metal before anyone else did, barring maybe some underground bands. But
Yeah, they took it
even
and
Iron
ran with
Maiden.
it.
I
Yeah,
mean,
oh yeah,
Judas
I was gonna
Priest took
say
Maiden out on tour. They're not like equivalent like in timelines. Their Priest is way older.
mhm.
So but they threw that out there, like even over Black Sabbath. I'm like, I hate when people do journalism, quote unquote, like that because it just tries to get you to start shit with people. But it's like Black Sabbath were around, but they didn't really think of themselves as a heavy metal band either.
They
So
still don't, like, and in a weird way, like, Black Sabbath sounded more metal in their later times, like with Ronnie James Dio, if you ask me,
Born
you know.
Again, Ian Gillan.
hmm Yeah, Ian Gillan, Born Again is a great one. Hell, even Dehumanizer is a great, it's one of their later albums, like it was done in the, I think, late 90s, maybe early 2000s. And very, very metal sounding, more so, because guitar tones have evolved, and are just a little more razor sharp and clean,
You
whereas
know
back in
what's
the 60s, it was just fuzz.
you know what's funny about heavy metal is like the Black Sabbath Born Again album and like Sirith Ungol and bands like that.
I was just listening to their new album yesterday. It's
Is that any
really
good?
good. It's
Yeah.
Yeah, I've kind of been going on like a deep dive of like this like there's this, how there's the new wave of everything, right? So now we have this new wave of traditional heavy metal coming out, where the kids are actually just trying to sort of copy the vibe of that early, like late 70s, early 80s underground metal. And it's pretty cool. They're doing a good job of it. but Sirith
Uh,
Ungol kind of popped up and is their most recent album, and it's really good. It's groovy and super heavy.
I like how they've stuck. See, that's the kind of thing. Well, I like where they've stuck with like the wizards and witches and stuff. And I
Yeah.
love that in metal. Like Sabotage's early stuff was like that. And this is why it's funny because Yngwie Malmsteen's Marching Out album, that
Mm-hmm.
song, in particular, the song, fuck, I can't remember the name of that song now. Burning candles, incantations, human sacrifice. You know that song?
Mm-hmm.
What's the name of that song?
I don't know. Believe it or not, I was never a huge Ingve guy, but
Well, it's Disciples of Hell, I think. Yeah, that's the name of it. But anyway, all that stuff and the medieval imagery goes hand in hand, like heavy metal.
oh
And
yeah,
what's
no,
really
it's
funny
perfect.
about that, because we were talking about Conan the Barbarian all afternoon here, is around the time that Conan the Barbarian was on HBO, because it was in the theaters. It came on HBO around 1984, 85.
Uh-huh.
And it was actually the second Conan movie had been in theaters in 85, Conan the Destroyer. So they were
Yeah.
showing the old one on HBO, and that's the first time I'd seen it. And I just met these guys in Salt Lake, and we all started listening to metal. And this one dude, Brian, my friend Brian, had all that stuff like Sirith Ungol, Yngwie Malmsteen, Black Sabbath, Born Again.
Mm-hmm.
All of that shit just kind of reminds me of Conan the Barbarian, and that's why I was like, I kind of equate those
Conan?
two together. I mean, it goes together really well to me, like heavy metal and like Conan and like wizards and
Conan?
monsters.
Say
What?
Conan?
I say Conan. It's Conan the Barbarian. Fuck Conan. It's not Conan. It's Conan.
All right, yeah. I suppose you say Iron instead
You
of
don't
iron.
say you don't say Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, do you? You say Sir
I
Arthur
do.
Conan Doyle. Conan the Barbarian.
Ah, it's Conan.
No, it's not. You're just doing what the movies told you. Fuck Hollywood.
I'll call up Robert E. Howard right
Anyways,
now.
what did you think of my point that I was making before you spliced me apart for like pronunciation here?
What was your point? Oh,
Exactly.
about metal and kind of like fantasy
Just how it goes hand in
imagery.
hand,
Oh
like
yeah,
the
it's perfect. I didn't, what's weird is because I remember going to a Comic Con, right?
you mean
And
Comicon?
I meant Comicon. Yeah, I mean Comic
Comicon,
Con.
yeah.
Comic Con.
Comicon.
Um, and one of the panels was like a Dungeons and Dragons panel, and they were sort of talking about like uh, it actually bugged me because this panel was talking about the how there was the satanic scare, with Dungeons and Dragons, the role playing games and
Yeah, it's
everything,
ridiculous.
and I remember I got in line to ask a question, and one of the questions I asked was um if part of the that whole satanic scare was also heavy metal, how heavy metal was so conducive to Dungeons and Dragons playing and that kind of imagery, and they're like, metal, like they didn't even know what I was talking about, like
See, that's the other thing is at that
they
time,
didn't
that
even
same
make the
friend,
connection of metal and Dungeons and Dragons. These people that are supposedly experts
yeah, because they didn't know.
didn't
But
even
at that
consider it.
time, that friend of mine that had all those records, he was also very much into D&D, and that's how I
Of
started
course he
playing
was.
D&D. So we would listen to those records,
Hmm.
Yngwie Malmsteen, Black Sabbath, Sirith Ungol, all that stuff, like Kiss, Iron Maiden, Judas Priest, and then we'd play D&D. So I'll forever equate all of that stuff with like, Tiamat and like, like just the
Yeah.
the
or
beholder creature and just all these fucking D&D entities and just looking through
yeah,
those
or
monster
even like the
manuals.
power metal stuff like Halloween and
See, I'm not into that. Where they
I
start
know,
getting
but
into that with like the dragons and Blind Guardian, like, no, I'm checking out there. I like the
yeah,
dark,
but
the more brooding, like serious dark stuff, not like the
right,
what?
but what I'm saying though is that that music is almost like a direct byproduct
Yeah,
of
yeah,
Dungeons and
probably.
Dragons and being fantasy and role playing and taking that kind of conducive aspect of it and applying it to music.
So you're into the comic books of Conan. What did you think of the movies?
Uh, I don't know. It's been a long time since I watched them. They were good though. They were pretty entertaining. But I don't know. I think we're overdue for like a really good, well done Conan movie. But I don't know. Like I wonder if it could be made these days. With not to fucking beat that dead horse of wokeness to death, but could Conan, you know, thrive in this environment, and he's having to navigate, pronouns and stuff like that, right? I just don't think Conan could really be done properly these days right now. Maybe that'll change. I don't know. I think things might be changing, but what do you think?
I think it would be funny to see him going,
Yeah.
they, them.
Yeah. Yeah, right.
Or like some girl like says, "No, I'm not a she." I don't know. Maybe we shouldn't even cross that bridge, but
Yeah, man. Yeah. Well, it'll be. I mean, I don't know. I think once again, maybe it'll turn around, but yeah, I don't think Conan could be done properly. So I don't want anybody to try it right now until things settle down a little bit. But I mean, like I don't know. It's hard to say. I was like actually into the comics. I had some of them, and they were probably my favorite comics to read. Over like Silver Surfer and all that kind of shit. But because I'm not into comics, like I'm not into superheroes. I don't. I do not like superhero stuff at all. I I don't know. They're almost as more hokey as vampires. You know. Although I did like Blade, but that was based off a comic, wasn't it?
did you like Marvel horror comics at all? Like Werewolf by Night or Son of Satan, any of those?
Never
Man
really.
Thing?
I'm not familiar with any of that. My my stint with comics was pretty brief. Like I had maybe a year or two where I was, thought I was going to be collecting them till the day I die, and then just sort of, you know, uh, yeah. Do you remember that comics place in Sugar House though? It was called what the hell? Comics Utah. Oh, you weren't. You probably didn't live there at the time.
Where?
It was in Sugar House. It was called. I think it was called Comics Utah.
Yeah, Comics Utah. They had one in West Valley, not far from where I live now, and they had one in Sugar House, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I remember going to the Sugar House one. That was really cool. But it was when that was open that I was kind of into my comics. So I mean, like, what that was like late '80s, early '90s, maybe. But it didn't last. Like my thing, my interest in comics didn't really last that long. So I never really was able to kind of explore everything that was out there. Um, but I mean, out of curiosity, like to bring it back to metal, like familiar with Vincent Locke.
Yes, that's Dead World, right?
Yeah, and he's the one that did he does every Cannibal Corpse album cover.
Yeah.
Yeah, were they cool? I mean, are they?
I don't know. I never read the comic. I don't know. No, I don't even know what it was about. I just always saw the covers in the comic stores. I would buy comics for a while, but
Okay.
it got kind of stupid. Like in the 90s,
Mm-hmm.
there is actually there's a comic book called Faust in the 90s. It was didn't really have
Mm-hmm.
anything to do with metal, but it was a metal guy who told me about them. But those were some pretty brutal comics. They were like really savage, gory, but they were really sexual too.
Mm-hmm.
So you had like these insanely hot naked girls that he would draw, like doing all this crazy X-rated stuff, and there'd be these guys just like ripping people apart, and like they'd have sex and gore and all this stuff together. And I mean, I don't know what the story was really about. It was something, some evil, whatever. But it was, I don't know. It was a very strange comic, but still have those.
Huh.
I had a Metallica comic book. They had the story of Metallica. Did you ever see
Oh
that
yeah.
one?
No.
I think I still have it. I don't know if I got rid of it or not, but yeah, it was like the story of Metallica. It was like Rock and Roll Comics #1, issue 1, Metallica. It had how they started out, and it had up to about Cliff Burton dies, and they kicked Dave Mustaine out, and he's like, "Fuck you guys," and like all of that. And then I think it was left off at like "And Justice for All" when that was about to come out, and I don't know if they ever did anything else. But there was a Guns N' Roses one too, I think. But
Oh yeah.
and then of course Kiss had their comic book back in the day.
Oh yeah. Do you have any of those?
I don't have the original one. I got some of the reprints they did in the '90s, but you know, it's not the real one where they put their blood in the ink. So who really cares? Plus, it was a pretty stupid comic book. But they had a Beatles comic too. Marvel Comics did a Beatles comic, but it's kind of lesser known. But it was out there in the '70s. But actually, there's talking of Conan the Barbarian, like the magazines.
Mm-hmm.
There's a thing called Creeps. Actually, it's not called Creeps anymore. It's called Shudder now. Have you seen those, like horror comics, but like a magazine?
I mean, I know there's the like the movie channel Shudder.
It's
It's like Netflix, but just for horror movies.
there's if you remember in the '70s, they had a couple of horror like magazines where it was like the Conan the Barbarian ones. They had a painted cover that was really cool, but inside was like a black and white comic. There are multiple different stories. There was one called Aerie. I think that was the Marvel version of those. There's another one called Creepy. And then there's, of course, Vampirella. They had all these different like names of like these different comic collections of like horror comics. But there's one now that was called The Creeps at first, but then I guess Dark Horse Comic Company like told them, because they own all the other comics now, like Creepy. So like that's too close to Creepy. You can't have that name. So this company, who are the ones who put out Creepy in the first place, Warren Publishing, had to change the name. So now it's not the Creeps anymore. It's Shudder, like gives me the shudders. And now they published a second one, which is called not Vampirella, but Mistress Carmilla or Vampiress Carmilla, I think actually. And all they are is just like just collections of stories inside. They're really good. It's just really great to read pulpy old horror stories. So I've been buying them like all the time. And what's really interesting about it is the first Mistress or Vampiress Carmilla issue had a painting on the cover by Ken Kelly, who died recently. But do you know what he's done in the rock world?
Ken Kelly?
Ken Kelly did the covers for Kiss Destroyer and Kiss Love Gun, and he painted the covers to some of these magazines too.
Oh.
And then we were just talking about like all this, these barbarians and metal and stuff just now. The Shudder magazines and the Creeps, they have some kind of a deal with Frank Frazetta. So there's a lot of Frazetta covers on a lot of their magazines. So you might be into it. I have an extra one I was going to send you as a surprise for Christmas, but I just ruined the surprise now. So
that's all right.
But yeah, it's they're kind of cool. It's just like basic horror comics, and they're like some of them are just like really cheesy, campy, and other ones are like actually pretty good, really interesting. But it's all just a fun read. It's just a good, sit down and just kind of read it, and the covers are cool, and like you can buy posters with the covers. So I got a few of those framed in my house right now, and cool stuff like that.
Yeah, you know what? I mean, just kind of as a general thing, I need to, like I said, I kind of want to get back into finding something to collect, and I kind of got a little bit of the vinyl going on, but I mean that's kind of a good idea, is like maybe graphic novel or something. I don't know. I need to start getting back into the collecting things, holding on to them, because I ain't gonna be able to retire.
You got to buy CDs. Records. Actually, I wouldn't even do that, because records aren't going to be worth anything.
You don't think vinyl's going to be worth anything?
Hell no. Everybody's putting shit out now. There's nothing that's valuable anymore. I think when people put stuff out with the intent of making it valuable, like, oh, it's colored vinyl, there's only 100 and it comes with a poster, it can be coveted, but it's not like if you actually had the first copy from
Right.
60 something of like that Sabbath album. You know, it's not like if you actually had Alice Cooper's real first record on Warner Brothers, or if you had the first Kiss album that didn't have the extra track on it, which was the original first release, you know, things like that. Like if you're
Hmm.
just releasing something with the intent that this is going to be limited and rare and I don't want money for it, it's usually doesn't work out that way.
Hmm.
That's just what I've seen. I mean, it will be like people will want it and everybody will buy it, but it's not going to be quite the same thing. It will show up for a couple of, you know, $100 or something on eBay, but
Uh-huh.
you know, I sold a CD once. I had a Naked City CD. Do you know that band?
No, is it a?
It's John Zorn, who's basically in the Mr. Bungle, right?
Yeah.
The saxophone player, but he had I can't remember who was in Naked City. It was basically some of the guys from Mr. Bungle, and I think one or two people from some other metal band. And they had association with Napalm Death. With Napalm Death, they had a band called Painkiller that John Zorn was in, where it's just crazy saxophone, just like crazy, like wee, like just crazy notes and shit, and it's Napalm Death over like it was really crazy. But Naked City was just this weird artsy avant-garde band. But I had a CD where it was like one long track. It was like 45 minutes or something, and I didn't really care about it, but I sold
Hmm.
it on eBay, and people were fighting over it. Just going crazy. They got into a bidding war, and I got like $200 or $300 for this CD that actually someone gave me. I didn't even buy it myself.
Hmm.
And I had In Flames. Do you know the band In Flames, right?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Well, I had a CD of theirs. It was not In Flames, but it was a band they had when they were kids, a death metal band called Ceremonial Oath. And
Okay.
it was on this British record label called Intellectual Convulsion. And they're also the ones who put out the first I Hate God. They put out a bunch of noisy, just industrial metal bands and stuff that no one ever really noticed. But
Uh-huh.
they put out Ceremonial Oath, who were pretty average, boring death metal. And I had that CD forever in my collection. And then Chris and Meredith that worked at the Abyss, they were like, "Oh my God, you have
Hmm.
that CD?" I'm like, "What? This?" They're like, "Yeah." I'm like, "This is boring ass death metal. No one ever cared about this band." Like, "Oh my gosh, Jesper Johansson from In Flames and yada 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 from Hammerfall." So apparently, there's a guy from In Flames and Hammerfall, and that's their first band. They're like,
Hmm.
"You should, if you don't like that, you should totally sell that on eBay. You'd make so much money." So I
Uh-huh.
did, and everybody got into a bidding war over it, and I got a couple $100 for that, like $300.
Uh-huh.
And that's cool, but at the end of the day, you do what? You pay a bill with it and buy some groceries, and then that's it.
Yeah, no, I mean,
I'd rather have the CD in my collection, even if I don't like it, and have the special thing than just sell it and get some money and fucking spend it. You know, it's that was pointless. It was just dumb. What do you
yeah.
think? Do you feel the same way, or am I stupid?
I mean, well, I don't know. I mean, because I think I'm a little different because I don't really get like I don't really have a sentimental attachment to things. Does that make sense? Which makes collecting hard for me, being a collector.
See, I'm
Because
exactly the opposite. Like I have
yeah, I
something
know.
like a CD of something I bought at a show, I would never get rid of it, even if I don't like
No,
it.
dude. Like, yeah, I mean, I'd love to just go to your storage shed and just like grab a bunch of things and eBay it, and so I don't have to work. But
I don't
yeah,
think it's
I'm the
quite
type of
that
person.
easy.
Oh, it'd be that easy. I bet you got
Well, that's
stuff
my
that's.
whole point, though. That's my whole point is everybody has everything these days, and it's not rare anymore. If I
Oh, really? I bet
release,
you got some rare stuff.
well, I do, but
Sure
I
you do.
mean, like I just said, it's like you sell it for a couple $100, and then at the end of the day, you know, so what? What do you have? Nothing.
Well, I mean, but if you well, here's the thing, yeah, if you have one item that's worth $200, yeah, whatever. But if you have like 100 items that are worth 200 or $300, now we're talking, right?
You know, I don't know. I have an eBay store. I just totally like decided it was time to do it, and I put a few things up, and like
Hmm.
it mostly it's just stuff from my label. Like no one, they're either looking at it or they aren't. But I have like a book about earache, and I actually, after about 2 or 3 months or 4 months of having the store with no action, I guess somebody just bought that earache book. But
Hmm.
and eBay sucks because they didn't even tell me. I'm like, I just happened to check there, and the guy ordered it like in the beginning of October. I'm like, it's almost November now. I'm like, well, shit. I didn't even know about that. Like, they didn't fucking send me an email or anything. So I emailed the dude, like, sorry, they didn't tell me shit. I'll send your book out right away. But yeah, it's and then also that's the other thing. It's like if you have online people like that, they take their cut and all that, and it's just and they tax you depending on your state laws. It's just not worth it. I'd rather keep the
I
fucking Entomb single that I had on 12-inch vinyl than sell it to some guy in Russia who's going to turn around and sell it again.
yeah.
It just and that matters to me. It's like I don't if I want to sell it to someone who's going to enjoy it, that wants it, then I'll be happy to
Mm.
do it. If they
You
really
just
are going
want
to
to sell it
cherish
to
it.
another
If they're just going to
yeah.
turn around and sell it, then fuck you. And that's what people do on eBay. I'm just like, no, fuck you.
Yeah, that's how it is.
And I sold some earache vinyl stuff I had too, just like some of the 90s earache vinyl stuff they did, like Fudge Tunnel and like the later Carcass and Entomb stuff. And I had 12-inch record singles and I sold them on eBay. Same thing. I'm like, okay, I sold it and I got a few bucks in my pocket, but now they're gone and I don't have those records either. So what was the point of that? You know, I just feel like it wasn't my favorite music. I have it on CD, and, you know, it doesn't matter, but it's just like, what do you have to show for it? And those guys that were doing that, I watched them and they turned right around and sold it on eBay. And there was some guy in Russia, it was another guy in fucking Guatemala. That's why I don't like eBay. And like this guy at work gave me these LeBron James Nike tennis shoes. They were like blood red with black, and I thought they were cool. And I was like, I'm not going to wear tennis shoes. So I tried to sell them on eBay. This guy from Guatemala or somewhere tries to buy them through another account in Florida. And that's already sketchy. I'm like, okay, fuck you. Who are you? And who's this guy? And what's going on here? And they're trying to talk me down in price and shipping. I'm like, no, 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 no. See, this is why I don't like doing this. And then I didn't sell them to the guy, which was my right as a seller on eBay. And the guy gave me a negative feedback thing, which is a big deal on eBay. And he like, seller promised and didn't deliver. And I'm like, fuck you, you little twerp. Like, fuck off, trying to rip me off. And then you try to shit on me. Fuck off. It's like my only negative thing too on eBay. Like all the rest are positive. It's just fuck the internet and fuck selling shit on eBay. I'm just like, I'd rather keep something and have, and this is a very vampiric thing to do. As you're a vampire, you have all your belongings in your castle. To wrap up the vampire talk.
There we go. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. It's like you're a wizard in the castle. You're like someone's walking through this room. They like pick up this jewel. Like, don't touch that. That's the jeweled eye of Agamotto. Like that'll destroy the planet Teflon if you like touch that the wrong way. Or, but meanwhile, he's got it just sitting there on his nightstand. It's like, okay, cool. I mean, I'm like that. I'm not a pack rat, but I like my cool shit. You know what I mean? Like you're not like that. You're a very stripped down guy where you're like, get the fuck out of here, right?
Yeah, I mean, well, yeah, and I just, like I said, I just don't seem to get attached to things. But I almost wonder if that's like almost like a character flaw, So I need to like learn to, I don't know, really just kind of go all in with the hobby and I don't know, be a completist at one thing at least. You know what I mean?
Well, I don't think
and plus, like I said, it's like, what's that?
I don't think you need to collect stuff. I mean, if you think that's what it is, maybe it's not music. Maybe, like I said, I'll send you one of those magazines I was telling you about, like Shudder magazine and Vampirus Camilla magazine, and maybe you'll start buying those. And they have posters of their magazine covers.
Oh, yeah, that's actually kind of maybe you might be right, because actually my sister for my birthday got me this. It was like a limited issue of like, I think it's like Time magazine. That's all about The Exorcist.
Ugh.
Like the whole history of The Exorcist. The whole book or the whole magazine is nothing but just about that movie, about how it was received back in the day, and if the set was actually cursed, bad things that happened, audience
like
reaction,
having nightmares.
Yeah, I don't know. It turned you into a
Satanist, what you were
ironically.
mentioning. We were talking about comic books and stuff. What what was I gonna? Oh yeah, I was gonna say like with collecting, how we were just talking about things being special, but they're not like in metal because they're releasing shit like just in droves, like of colored vinyl and like
Mm-hmm.
Earig's like continuously shitting out like Napalm Death Scum on this color vinyl, that color vinyl. Now it's remastered. Now there's like a signed poster. It's like, stop it. Like, fuck off. You're trying to just build people for money at one point. But comic books were like that. And that's why the comic industry went belly up in the 90s, kind of, which is around the time I was buying comics. Is they
Mm-hmm.
were putting out issue 1 of this. It's going to be a fantastic series. Then there's issue 1 of that. And then Todd McFarlane is doing the art for this story. And this is his first issue. And, it's like none of that shit really amounted to anything at the end of the day. And
Mm-hmm.
what I did is I started buying comics. And at first I got hooked into that shit. Like I'd buy like this or that because it was issue number 1. Everybody's always like, oh, you got to get issue 1 of anything. It's going to be worth money. So I did. Never was. Like, there's a thing called Sleepwalker that Marvel Comics did. It was a fucking stupid comic. Never made it past like 10 issues, I think, possibly. A shitty artwork, shitty story, stupid characters. I have issue 1, not worth any fucking money. But then I realized in comics that there was stuff I liked that I missed from my childhood in the 70s. So I started buying horror comics like Man-Thing and Werewolf by Night,
Mm-hmm.
Dracula, and the Son of Satan. They had all these cool horror comics. So then when you go to places like Comics Utah, where they have these big bins of comics and you're just way in the back of the store, like thumbing through all this shit
Mm-hmm.
and you're buying them. And like, then it's cool because you're finding this shit that's special to you, not to everyone else. Like, you don't want something that everybody wants and everybody covets this new record on pink vinyl. You want something that means something to you because it was from this
Well,
time that you liked it.
well, no, and you kind of brought up a good point because what I'm actually when I do buy vinyl, what I'm kind of basing it on is not even whether I think it's going to be worth anything or increase in value. I'm only going to buy stuff that's like important to me. Like,
Well, yeah,
you know
I
what I
mean,
mean?
but a lot of people don't do that, and that's not how they release things these days. That's what I'm saying. It's
Mm,
and a lot of times it's just something with someone in the band. Like I think I may have told this before, but like when I was friends with Jill, who does Razorback Records, she was like, "Well, do you want to put out this band with me?" And
mhm.
like, it's nothing. Like it's just boring death metal. And she's like, "Yeah, but it's the bass player from Grave." I'm like, well, that's cool, but I mean, it's nothing really that great. She's like, you don't think that'll make it sell? I'm like, not really. I mean, maybe, like, not specifically, but it's not
I might
like
have
the
to
bass
check them
player
out.
from Grave is like a huge selling point compared to like,
Mm.
like Rob Barrett or somebody, or I don't know. It's just didn't seem like that was a reason to do it to me. And she's like, hey, you're right, probably. I'm like, I don't want to do it. And don't remember what that band was, but
It's probably
that's what I
pretty
mean.
good
It's like,
now. Like it's one of those things. Maybe if you revisit it, you'd be like, "Oh, I should have released it."
Not really, because I was just gonna say there's a lot of people in bands, and this is what they're doing now is they're just releasing shit like crazy. They have a new band,
Hmm.
and there's a new project band. It's the same couple of guys, and they'll
Hmm.
put out something with another dude from another band on another label, and that
Hmm.
just goes on. It sounds the same, and they don't think it does, but it sounds homogenized. That's why local bands do that because they have the same 2 or 3 core members that are in all these bands. They tend to sound the same after a while, and it's like how many, in Norway when the black metal thing broke big, like after a while you had one guy from Dark Throne, one guy from Emperor in every fucking band. It got ridiculous after a while. And that was
Hmm.
their big selling point. Samoth from Emperor. Oh my God, you had to buy it and everybody bought it. I'm like, this sounds just like Emperor. This sounds
Yeah, but you
just
know
like
what? Like
Mayhem.
I know I mean, I think the reason for that though is and you see that in the death metal community too, is um, there's just not that many musicians that want to play that style of music. So a lot of these bands end up just being members of other bands. You
Well,
know.
that's true too. Like when I was on the phone with Peter from Hypocrisy once, I was like, "So is Sweden awesome? Is the metal scene over there crazy? Are there like shows every day?" He's like, "No, not really. It's usually the
Mm-mm.
same couple of guys in all the bands, and that's kind of it. They don't really play
Right.
shows, and when they do, it's like, well, I've seen them. I'm like, really? He's like,
Yeah,
yeah,
especially drummers, man. Like it's hard to find drummers that can do, uh, can play blast beats for 6 minutes straight. So,
yeah,
um, you gotta do what you can if you want to make this kind of music. So a lot of times it means just sharing members with each other, which obviously is gonna create a
See, and
little
that
bit of
leads
the
to what
same
you were
sound.
talking about. You made a different point on a couple of different shows about frontier records, where they just take a guy from
Hmm.
Journey, a guy from Kansas, a guy from Rat, and a
Hmm.
guy from Cannibal Corpse, and they have a band. It's
Yep.
like, okay, well, so what? You know, they're all in this band, but it still sounds like basic homogenized rock. Like, it's
Hmm.
so what?
Yeah, I mean it's just, but in a weird way, like it's filling a niche. There's a group of people that demand that sound, and it's good for those musicians because it keeps them working. So if Frontiers comes up to me and says, "Hey, I've got, I'll give you this much money, just do a project with, you know, Harry Hess from Harem Scarum, and you can do that over and over again, then great, there's your career in music, So, and this because no one's buying music, like they used to. This is a way for musicians to sort of stay working, is to just be a part of all these projects, even if they are thrown together by like Frontiers Records, because I know for a fact Frontiers Records is probably reaching out to these guys and assembling them and creating these bands, and they're usually put out one, maybe two albums just to sort of fill a certain niche sound,
Yeah, that's what I
you
mean.
know.
Like,
And to me, there a lot of times it's not very interesting music, but I understand it, and in a way, like I hope they keep doing it, just because it keeps these guys active, you know.
like Abba from Immortal, he had a band with this guy and that guy from this band and that band in Norway, and it was called I. Like, I am this, I am that, and
Hmm.
everybody was freaking out about it. It came out and it
Hmm.
disappeared. Like, not one person said anything after like the first few days. It's vanished into the mist of history. It's like, so what? And that's one of many bands like that. There were so many bands
Hmm.
from Norway that did that shit. Like, there
Yeah,
was a band
a
called,
lot of it doesn't stick, but
yeah, I mean, they the Emperor guys had another band called Zyklon. It started off as Zyklon B, this really hate black metal thing, and then it turned into this
oh yeah,
Zyklon, this technical death metal wizardry that they did, and even
yeah.
that didn't
I
last for
think I had
past
that
two albums.
album. It wasn't bad.
Well, some of the stuff they did was all right. I mean, some of these bands, but a lot of it was just like fodder. It was like, oh, this guy and that guy are doing this. Oh, I gotta buy it. And this guy and that
Hmm.
guy are doing that. Oh, gotta buy it. So, I bought Lockup. There's the band Lockup, and it was the guy from The Crown on vocals. It was one dude from Napalm Death, one guy from The Crown on guitar, and then the drummer was some. I was just different guys from different bands. It was always never really that interesting to me. And Bloodbath, and there's another band called Comic Con from Sweden. They all did that. They like rotate singers, and that made it kind of interesting. But at the end of the day, it still just sounded like 10 songs of average death metal. It was,
Hmm.
so what if this guy's in the band? It's just still boring death metal. Sorry. So
Yeah. I don't know.
anyway,
Your boring one man's boring death metal is my awesome metal.
well, we
So
talked about this. Like, you got into shit like quite a long time after I was already past all of that. So you picked up where I was like done with it. So you like the more modern commercialized stuff, or the more like where they're more experimenting. So I
yeah.
don't know. Maybe I'll do the same with Conan the Barbarian. I'll go pick up the one that you hate the most, and like, oh, this is the best book, man. And you're like, fuck that book.
Nah, dude, it's all good. I don't think there's not a bad Conan book. There's just
So
preferences. Yeah, man.
we could probably go on longer, but I gotta take my mom shopping. So
All right. Well, good. You're a good kid. You're a good son.
yeah, I should already be there, but I haven't left yet because Mark's distracting me.
All right. Well, you get going. You take care of mama.
All right, pal.
All
We
right,
got to
brother.
talk about I don't know. I guess our fallen metal heroes next time.
Yeah, yeah. We'll figure something out.
Will we?
Will we? Yes, we will. Maybe you can learn how to pronounce Conan,
That's not how you say it. It's Conan.
dude.
Sir Arthur Conan
Conan
Doyle,
these
Conan the
nuts.
Barbarian. Sir Conan the Barbarian.
Whatevs.
So you can't even say whatever. You have to say whatevs.
Right? That's the hip. That's what the kids say.
Fuck what the kids say.
All right.
I'm saying what I say. We're not gonna
Okay.
flip around and go, oh, Conan the woke barbarian.
Yeah.
We can't
Right.
attack the wizard. That wouldn't be nice.
Yeah.
All right, fella.
All right, man.
I'll
Talk to
talk to
you
you
next week.
later.